Tier 1 is the easiest mode of the undead world, where slow shamblers give you every advantage you need to stay alive. These zombies move like they're trudging through waist-deep mud, arms stretched out in that classic I want to give you a hug pose, while giving you all the time in the world to walk away. From Romero's original Night of the Living Dead through Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, the pattern stays consistent. They shamble towards sound and light, pile up at barricades, and struggle with basic obstacles like closed doors or stairs. Speed isn't their weapon, numbers are. The trick is not getting cornered or letting complacency turn four walls into a false sense of invincibility. Shaun of the Dead and Little Monsters proves that even in tight urban spaces or confined outbreak zones, these shamblers stay manageable. You can literally mimic their shuffle and movements and damn near blend in. They get distracted easily, follow predictable paths, and respond to simple misdirection. Pride and Prejudice in Zombies shows what happens when society adapts instead of crumbles. Train your people, establish perimeter drills, and treat zombie defense like any other survival skill. Bladed weapons work. Barricades hold. Discipline beats chaos. Even We Are Zombies strips away the apocalypse entirely, turning the undead into a capitalist social issue rather than an extinction level event, because they're so easy to deal with and manage. When the threat moves this slow and this predictable, coexistence becomes possible. Plants vs. Zombies nails the core logic. Every counter is cheap, telegraphed, and effective because shamblers just don't adapt. And even though later levels get more intense, they still are getting cooked by sunflowers and potatoes. Let's be real. Your survival comes down to key habits. Stay quiet to avoid drawing crowds, keep distance because you can always outpace them, and barricade early and treat choke points like doorways and staircases as your best friend. Headshots work, but melee attacks save ammo for single zombies. The zombies themselves rarely kill you in this tier. What kills you is panic, poor planning, or just turning on the people next to you when cabin fever sets in. Day of the Dead hammered that point home when humans tore each other apart over power and paranoia, while the undead stayed predictable outside. Tier 1 zombies are beatable because they give you time to think, space to plan, and clear counters to deploy. These are the apocalypses with a safety net. Tier 2 is where the training wheels come off and survival stops being a guarantee. Infection spreads faster, casualties pile up quicker, and one bad call can cascade into a total cookout. But here's the thing, with planning, discipline, and a little bit of luck, communities can still endure. These outbreaks demand logistics, teamwork, and the kind of mental fortitude that keeps you from losing it when supplies run low. Your survival rate hovers somewhere between 40 and 70% if you prepare. If you don't, those numbers drop like a rock. The Walking Dead universe shows what long-term survival looks like when societies collapse but humanity doesn't go extinct. Fortified settlements like Alexandria or the prison hold out for months, even years, but the real threat isn't the walkers shuffling outside the gates. It's rival groups like Negan's crazy ass with the Saviors who get a kick out of maintaining and dominating other groups for fun, or groups like Alpha and the Psychos that move place to place, literally wearing zombie skin and clothes, and strategize like grandmasters in chess. Resources dwindle, people fracture under pressure, groups turn on each other over canned food and gasoline. The walkers become background noise while human conflict takes center stage. But when large groups of zombies form, people get isolated and cornered, and then it's GG's. We see other variants and types of zombies come to the forefront, but in those cases, preparation is still key. Games like Zombie U, State of Decay, 7 Days to Die, DayZ, and Project Zomboid capture that same brutal survival loop. You manage food, ammo, infection risk, and morale while the game punishes every mistake. Disciplined survivors thrive by establishing routines, fortifying bases, and planning supply runs with military precision. Casuals who wing it get wiped out fast because these worlds don't forgive shit you just do on the fly. The key to survival is recognizing the chaos early and getting out before the area becomes a death trap. Survivors who reach rural areas, islands, or early evacuation routes usually make it. Those who hesitate or try to ride it out in apartments usually don't. Reality Z and Alive show similar patterns. Pockets of safety exist if you can reach them, but timing and geography literally decides whether you live or die. Dead Rail's Agent 15 from Roblox, Road of the Dead, and Arizona Sunshine treat outbreaks as localized disasters rather than extinction events. Ground Zero is a nightmare, but survivability skyrockets if you're outside those hot fortified zones. Vehicles, weapons, and discipline give you the edge you need to escape before containment fails. No More Room in Hell rewards teamwork and cooperation above everything else. The infection is slow, shambler-based, and manageable in earlier rounds if your squad communicates and watches each other's backs. Lone wolves fall, squads thrive, and killing floor escalates the difficulty with bioweapon created Zeds that hit harder and move faster than standard shamblers. And again, squads with solid firepower and coordinated tactics succeed. Survival depends on group cohesion and knowing when to hold the line versus when to retreat. Tier 2 outbreaks kill fast and hit hard, but they're not extinction events. The difference between surviving and becoming a statistic comes down to whether you can band together, ration supplies, and keep panic from spreading faster than the virus itself. Tier 3 is where survival stops being about outrunning slow shamblers and starts demanding real strategy, firepower, and adaptability. These outbreaks mutate, organize, and swarm with enough force to collapse entire regions. Your survival rate drops somewhere between 15 and 40%, with heavy losses even amongst those prepared. The core difference here is evolution. Zombies develop special abilities, armor, pack intelligence, or tactical roles that turn them into legit freaks of nature. Land of the Dead and Army of the Dead showed us zombies that can learn and adapt, with leaders like Big Daddy coordinating attacks against fortified settlements. Suddenly, your traps don't work because the undead learn to avoid them. Cities survive behind walls, but stepping outside becomes a death sentence, like that crazy scene in 28 Years Later. Left 4 Dead's Green Flu, Dead Rising, Dead Trigger, and SAS, Zombie Assault, all share the same nightmare. Special effected that fill tactical roles. Tanks smash through defenses. Spitters and boomers force you out of cover. Screamers call hordes. Some wear armor, and others move with unnatural speed. And a few just explode, cause why not? The sheer variety overwhelms unprepared groups, even when most stay headshot vulnerable. Military intervention and antivirals can localize these outbreaks, but civilian populations get shredded because survival becomes gear dependent. Disciplined squads with heavy weapons stand a chance. Everyone else collapses. Dying Light takes mutations and adds a timer. Standard infected are manageable during daylight, but when the sun sets, volatiles emerge as apex predators with enhanced everything. This is the only reason why they aren't placed higher on the list, but danger levels are definitely top tier. UV light and GRE serums keep humanity clinging to survival, but only barely. Cabinari of the Iron Fortress does something similar with Cabinet that have armored hearts requiring specialized weapons or train-mounted firepower to kill. Both worlds highlight that staying stationary means death, so societies adapt through constant mobility or fortified zones with strict curfews. Seoul Station and Train to Busan demonstrate what happens when you mix rapid infection with urban density and enclosed spaces. Victims turn in seconds, creating fast movers with swarm behavior that overwhelm through relentless aggression, like the iconic scene where Seok-woo is running for his life with his family while the zombies are piling on top of each other, running full speed. Train to Busan specifically traps survivors in train cars where one infected passenger, mid-journey, forces brutal decisions about who gets left behind. Choke points like stations and bridges become bloodbaths. Cities collapse within hours. Hesitation kills faster than the infected themselves. Even with Days Gone, they crank the horde concept into a living ecosystem where freakers move in massive coordinated groups that react to terrain, weather, and your tactics. Direct confrontation at any stage in this tier is a cookout. Z Nation and Black Summer add variant zombies with inconsistent threat levels, while Zona Mera shows how human negligence turns containable outbreaks into regional disasters through industrial accidents and political corruption. We see the same thing in the Sadness. The pattern across all of Tier 3 is clear. These outbreaks don't end the world, but they wipe entire regions off the map. Survivors last by fortifying defensive positions, learning mutation patterns, exploiting terrain, and maintaining discipline under pressure. One bad decision, one moment of panic, and the horde takes over everything. Tier 4 is where outbreaks stop being regional problems and start threatening entire nations. These infections spread fast through rage viruses, demonic hybrids, airborne pathogens, or engineered bioweapons that mutate beyond control. If containment fails in those critical first days, millions die and societies fracture beyond repair. This is exactly what we see in The Walking Dead once we get a glimpse of how nations and certain groups react to the virus. Your survival rate drops to somewhere between 5 and 15%, with heavy global casualties even in best case scenarios. Humanity can survive, but the cost is massive, and the world that emerges looks nothing like the one that fell. Resident Evil sits at the center of Tier 4 as the poster child for engineered chaos. The Umbrella Corporation and its successors created an alphabet soup of infections. The T virus, G virus, C virus, Las Plagas, Ouroboros, you name it, and each one capable of devastating cities when released. Standard zombies fall to headshots, but the real nightmare comes from BOWs, bioorganic weapons that mutate endlessly into tyrants, lickers, and nemesis-level threats with collective intelligence and tools ready to beat the shit out of anybody. And don't get me started with the progenitor virus and Mother Miranda. Some strains spread airborne, others through water or bites. And the variety means containment strategies that work on one outbreak fail catastrophically on the next. Raccoon City, Tall Oaks, and countless other locations get wiped off the map before anyone can create an effective response. The key reason Resident Evil stays in Tier 4 instead of climbing higher is containability, specifically with the viruses and Las Plagas. Outbreaks remain localized to cities or regions because organizations like the BSAA, TerraSave, and hero-level agents like Leon Kennedy and Chris Redfield consistently stop the spread before it goes viral. The infections are devastating but not inevitable. Governments can nuke Ground Zero if necessary. Antivirals exist for some strains. Remote areas stay unaffected. The world just teeters on the edge repeatedly, but humanity doesn't fall because someone always manages to destroy the source, eliminate the mastermind, or deploy a countermeasure in time. It's catastrophic when it hits, but not extinction level because the systems to fight back still function. The rest of Tier 4 follows similar patterns of devastating speed. 28 days later's Rage virus turns victims in seconds through blood contact, collapsing the UK within weeks because the infection moves faster than any quarantine. The infected eventually starve since they're still alive, which creates a natural endpoint that prevents total extinction. Wreck in quarantine makes demonic possession with viral infection, creating hive-like aggression in sealed buildings where headshots work inconsistently. All of Us Are Dead and I Am Hero add intelligent mutations with half-bees and ZQN parasites that retain cognitive function, adapt tactics, and form hive structures in cities that require targeted destruction to stop. Maze Runner and The Girl with All the Gifts introduces environmental transmissions that make containment nearly impossible. The flare virus goes airborne with long incubation periods. The Girl with All the Gifts uses evolved cordyceps spores that create immune second-generation fungal children who trigger apocalyptic blooms, shifting humanity from dormant species to struggling survivors. Happiness shows pharmaceutical negligence creating bloodborne infections with hyper-aggressive symptoms. Then there's cult classics like Pontypool, which abandon biology entirely for mimetic infection, spreading through English language comprehension, requiring linguistic redefinition to stop the spread. The defining characteristics across all of Tier 4 is speed and scale. These infections spread faster than governments can react, turning early containment into the only real defense. Miss that window and you watch nations fall in real time. Remote isolation works if you reach it fast enough. Island firebreaks hold if enforced ruthlessly. For me, Resident Evil proves that even with endless mutations and corporate bioterrorism, humanity survives when response teams can localize and lock the fuck in before outbreaks spread globally. But for most people, caught in Ground Zero, survival just comes down to luck, timing, and being far enough from the epicenter when everything goes wrong. Tier 5 is where civilization cracks and nations fall. These outbreaks don't just overwhelm cities, they bring entire communities to their knees through near inescapable vectors like airborne spores, environmental contamination, or supernatural forces. Military responses, natural weaknesses, or sheer luck might keep small pockets of humanity alive, but nothing looks the same afterwards. Survival rates with this shit drop to less than 5%, depending on geography, timing, and whether you have access to the right countermeasures. Societies collapse entirely. Only fortified locations persist, and even those are temporary solutions to permanent problems. The Last of Us stands as the defining example of Tier 5 collapse. The cordyceps infection spreads through airborne spores and bites, creating a universal threat that dismantles infrastructure and food chains within months. Clickers and hunters act animalistic and behave like something is forcing every move they make. But the real killer is the fungus itself. The fungus is interwoven through pipes, nature, and everything you can think of. Spores make entire sections of cities uninhabitable without gas masks. Fungal armor makes headshots risky. If the infection blooms globally, less than 1% of humanity survives outside military containment areas like Fedra zones. 20 years after Outbreak Day, the world is a graveyard of abandoned cities where nature reclaims everything and Mother Nature just runs its course, and survivors fight over scraps. The infection doesn't end civilization in one dramatic event. It's a slow grind. It grinds it down through relentless environmental pressure until organized societies simply stop functioning. What makes this tier so devastating is the combination of speed and scale. I Am Legend shows what happens when the Carpenter virus goes airborne and bloodborne simultaneously, turning most of humanity into dark seekers within days. They're superhuman in strength and aggression, but burn in sunlight, which creates a brutal day-night survival rhythm. Fortification and UV exposure allow isolated survivors to hold out, but civilization collapsed overnight here. World War Z takes a different approach with bite transmission that incubates in seconds, creating hive-like swarm dynamics where infected pile onto each other to scale walls or float through choke points like water. The zombies from the movie differ from that of the literature it was built from, but they ultimately end the same way. Regional quarantines and the ironic pack, where terminal illnesses make you invisible to the infected, offer slim survival chances, but most of humanity gets overwhelmed by sheer numbers and coordination. Kingdom and Overlord give us that supernatural element that escalates threats beyond biological containment. Kingdom uses a resurrection plant combined with waterborne transmission and bites, creating outbreaks that pause in winter but explode when temperatures rise. The part of the danger that's crazy comes from royal courts manipulating the infection from political gain, turning containable disasters into nation-ending catastrophes. Overlord shows Nazi occult experiments creating undead that generate and retain fragments of human awareness, combining berserker strength with tactical thinking. Small allied teams destroy labs before mass production, but if scaled up, these infections become unstoppable. Environmental infections push Tier 5 into nightmare territory. Gears of War's emulsion affects all living biomass, requiring planetary-scale weaponry to stop it because standard tactics fail against lambent that evolve rapidly and coordinate through hive networks. Warframe's technocyte biomass assimilates flesh and metal, consuming entire civilizations within days, unless high-tech factions deploy tenniscale firepower. Wormwood is another instance that brings the airborne meteor gas that makes zombies dormant during the day and hyper-aggressive at night, forcing survivors into mobile convoys because staying stationary just isn't a choice. The Night Eats the World strips away the large-scale chaos and shows Tier 5 collapse from an intimate angle. One survivor, isolated in a Parisian apartment building, surrounded by zombies attracted to sound, watching the world end through windows while maintaining sanity through routine. It's the same infrastructure collapse and depressing side of survival, just focused on the psychological toll. Doomsday, The Last Stand Aftermath, Dead Ahead, and Newtopia all share the same pattern: hyper-contagious outbreaks that crumble national systems entirely, leaving scattered survivor factions operating under martial law or scorched earth policies. Conventional weapons work, but it doesn't matter when supply chains vanish and government authority evaporates. You might live in Tier 5, but it'll be behind walls under military rule, constantly on the move in convoys or hunkered down in isolated forts, where every day is a fight to maintain what little remains. Civilization as we know it ends here. Tier 6 is where survival stops being a strategy and starts becoming a miracle. These outbreaks break every rule you've learned so far. They spread through the air, through screens, through dimensional rifts, or just refuse to die no matter what you do. Standard survival tactics fail completely. Survival rate here is way under 5% for sure, without extraordinary circumstances like super science, divine intervention, or literal reality warping solutions. If you make it out of Tier 6 alive, it's not because you were smart or prepared, it's because you got lucky, and even that might not be enough. Marvel Zombies shows what happens when the infection doesn't just hit regular people, but superheroes who retain their full intelligence and power. The quantum virus spreads through bites, blood, and quantum contamination, turning heroes like Spider-Man, Hulk, and Wolverine into strategic, regenerating nightmares that consume entire planets. They don't shamble, they fly, teleport, and coordinate planetary scale attacks. There's no realistic countermeasure on Earth because, let's be real, ain't nobody stopping the Hulk and characters like Thor and Doctor Strange if they go full crash out mode and start infecting everyone. Planetary collapse becomes inevitable within days, and the infection spreads across dimensions. Call of Duty zombies operate on similar cosmic horror logic through Element 115 and Aether Corruption. Regular zombies die to bullets, of course, but the source is extra-dimensional, which means they respond endlessly. The infection isn't biological, it's necromantic energy bleeding through reality itself. Standard survival tactics buy you time, but never really solve the problem. Only god-tier, reality-warping Easter egg solutions that involve manipulating space-time and sealing dimensional rifts can stop the outbreak. Without those interventions, the entire planet is doomed because you're not fighting a virus you can contain or cure. You're fighting a fundamental corruption of reality. Warhammer 40k takes the concept and scales it to galactic proportions with Nurgle's Daimonic Plague and Necron reanimation protocols. These aren't infections you fight with medicine or military tactics. Nurgle's plagues are warp-spawn supernatural forces that corrupt flesh and soul simultaneously. Necrodermis reanimation brings ancient machines back as undead legions. Only god-tier weaponry or galaxy-spawning empires can even slow these threats down. Sector outbreaks routinely end civilization. Without the infrastructure of planetary defense forces and space marine chapters, entire worlds fall in days. What connects these different threats is scale and impossibility. There are no problems you solve with better tactics or smarter planning. They require fundamentally breaking the rules of reality to survive. The rest of Tier 6 shares the same pattern of hopelessness through different vectors. Return of the Living Dead makes zombies literally unkillable through trioxin gas that aerosolizes and spreads through rain. Dismemberment doesn't even work here because the parts keep moving like weird Addams Family monsters, and burning spreads contamination. Once airborne, the outbreak becomes self-sustaining with no effective countermeasures. DCeased used mimetic digital infection through the anti-life equation, spreading at light speed through screens and networks, collapsing most of Earth in days, even with superhuman defenders. And with this generation and how we're addicted to our phones every second, this would literally cook everyone. Prototype creates near unkillable carriers like Alex Mercer who assimilate biomass and spread Blacklight Virus, requiring nuclear strikes just to slow them down. The Crossed, the Sadness, and Black Gas create vivid visuals to show that this isn't supernatural. It's what happens when humans retain their intelligence while becoming hyper-violent, sadistic, and depraved. The Cross spreads through bodily fluids and organized grape torture raids with full cognitive function. The Sadness turns entire cities into ultraviolet nightmares within hours through airborne infection. Black Gas uses hallucinogenic contamination to collapse social structures when infected people use tools and speech to commit atrocities while hallucinating. There's no vaccine, no cure, just mass violence that ends civilization through behavioral collapse rather than traditional infection. Star Wars expands the threat to spacefaring scale with Death Troopers and Seth alchemy turning entire starships into plague factors. Once Seth Lords become part of the lore, that's all I need to know. If unleashed planet-wide without Imperial intervention, normal populations stand zero chance. Tier 6 outbreaks aren't battles you fight, they're extinction countdowns. Unless you have a nuke, a spaceship, reality warping powers, or literal plot armor, you're not making it out. This is where humanity's survival hinges entirely on factors beyond human control. Tier 7 is the point of no return. These aren't outbreaks you survive. They're forces of nature that consume entire planets, rewrite biology at the molecular level, or erase civilizations in days. Your survival rate drops to damn near zero, and that's being generous. If you're caught in a Tier 7 scenario, it's already over. No amount of planning, firepower, or luck will save you because these infections operate on scales that make human resistance irrelevant. The only survival comes from pure chance, isolation in unreachable locations, or literal narrative cheat codes where the plot demands someone lives to tell the story. The Flood from Halo stands as the ultimate example of why Tier 7 represents true extinction. This isn't a virus you catch and turn into a mindless zombie. The Flood is a parasitic infection that spreads through spores and direct contact, reanimating corpses and integrating technology into its biomass. Every body it takes becomes part of a growing collective intelligence controlled by the Gravemind, a galaxy-spanning hive mind capable of strategy, deception, and coordinated conquest across multiple star systems. The Flood doesn't just kill you, it absorbs your knowledge, memories, and capabilities, making itself smarter with every victim. Combat forms retain enough motor function to use weapons and whip vehicles around. Carrier forms detonate to spread infection spores even further, and pure forms shift between configurations to adapt to terrain and threats. The infection mutates instantaneously, turning anything biological into part of the collective within moments of contact. Once I saw the AI intelligence Cortana get hacked and sent into a full-blown depression, I knew the Gravemind was nothing to play with. What makes the Flood truly terrifying is scale. Local resistance is meaningless. Quarantine fails because spores spread through air systems. Military response fails because the Flood learns your tactics and turns your own soldiers against you with their training intact. It integrates Forerunner and Covenant technology, piloting starships and operating weapon systems. Once it establishes a Gravemind, the infection coordinates planetary consumption with strategic precision. The Forerunners, a civilization capable of building megastructures and traversing galaxies, couldn't even stop this shit through conventional warfare. Their only solution was the Halo Array, galaxy-scale superweapons designed to sterilize all sentient life in the galaxy to starve the Flood of hosts. If the Flood reaches critical mass on Earth, humanity has no countermeasure. You don't fight it, you don't outlast it, and the planet just falls. And the infection spreads to other worlds through captured ships until entire systems collapse. Resident Evil appears again here, but this time we're talking worst case globalization scenarios where umbrella-level bioweapons deploy worldwide simultaneously. We're not talking about localized T-virus outbreaks that heroes can contain. We're talking about G-virus mutations that evolve continuously, NE-alpha parasites that grant intelligence and coordination, and global Las Plagas integration where infection retains full cognitive function while operating under hive control. Plagas hosts use tools, organize ambushes, while tyrants, G-mutants, and Ouroboros specimens mutate beyond recognition. Airborne strains, combined with parasitic and fluid vectors, means containment becomes impossible. The human baseline goes extinct within months for sure, and doesn't stand a chance at all. The virus escalates faster than any response can adapt. Black Lanterns from DC Comics operates on cosmic horror logic, where death itself becomes the weapon. Necro rings resurrect any corpse across the universe, retaining full consciousness and memories while serving Necron's will. Every death feeds the army in exponential growth. You can't kill what's already dead unless you destroy the rings with emotional spectrum entities, which requires the entire Lantern Corps and cosmic level intervention. And let's be real, no one's getting to that level. Normal civilizations get annihilated almost instantly because conventional weapons are useless and every casualty you inflict just adds to their numbers. Toxic Commando introduces the Sludge God, a primordial contamination that turns entire landscapes hostile. Water systems become poison, soil becomes corrosive, and air becomes toxic. The zombies and sludge-infected bodies can be destroyed, but the sludge itself is essentially immortal. It's not a virus you cure or an infection you contain. It's environmental corruption that spreads through terrain itself by any means necessary. Convoys and weapons buy time, but if unleashed globally, the planet turns against all life. There's no countermeasure because you'd need to sterilize the entire biosphere. The pattern across Tier 7 is brutally clear. These aren't survival scenarios, they're extinction events. No guns, no bunkers, no last stands matter. The Flood consumes galaxies. Global bioweapon deployment ends civilization. Black Lanterns resurrect every corpse in history, and the Sludge God poisons worlds. You don't fight these threats. You pray you're not on the planet when it starts, and even that might not be enough if the infection spreads to other systems. This is where humanity's story ends, unless gods or superweapons intervene.